Imagine, if you will, a party of adventurers, their tales sung in taverns across the land. Between quests and battles, where do they lay their heads? Where do they stash all their amazing loot? It's time to talk about home bases. Forget dusty bedrolls and rented rooms. Let's explore giving your heroes a place of their own. Before you toss off your Dungeon Master cloak and put on your realtor pin, you've got to answer one very important question. Should you give your players a home base? Because the answer isn't always yes. If you're running a 3-hour one-shot adventure, a home base is probably not going to do much unless you want to spend those 3 hours playing a pen and paper version of The Sims. If you're running a continent or dimension-spanning adventure where the players won't be staying in one place, don't even bother giving a home because they aren't going to be there anyways. If your adventure centers around the characters being stranded and feeling adrift and needing to make their way back home, don't give them a new one to get invested in. However, if your adventure is going to take place around a particular city or geographical area and it's going to go on for a while, go for it. Let them put down roots and get invested in the area and the NPCs around their new home. Because once they have a home, they will become invested. And if your group is a bunch of murder hobos, then having a home can solve that problem. 1, they have a home so they aren't hobos anymore. And 2, they're less likely to murder a shopkeeper if that shopkeeper is also their neighbor. Hopefully. So when's the best time to give your player characters a home? Well, I recommend giving it as a reward early on in their adventure. Have them do something that warrants a building as a reward, even if just barely. In Dragon Heist, for example, they get a rundown mansion, that's right, a whole ass mansion, at level 2 after completing the first quest of the game just because their quest giver didn't have the gold to pay them. Or instead of having somebody give them a home, the players can just take it. Maybe they cleared out a rundown castle outside of town and now it stands empty, ready for the player characters to move in. After all, it's not squatting if the owners are dead. Whatever home you give your players should be interesting, amazing, and unique. Maybe it's a haunted mansion in the middle of a city. Maybe it's a mountain fortress with a commanding view of the surrounding land. Perhaps it's an underwater base surrounded by a magical bubble of air. Or maybe it's an extra-dimensional, semi-sentient, time-traveling police callbacks that's bigger on the inside. Whatever. The sky's the limit, so go nuts. Actually, the sky isn't the limit. You could even give them an airship too. That'd be pretty cool. This video is brought to you by my own book, Libris Nocturnum. The digital version is out now and we're still taking pre-orders for the physical book. Libris Nocturnum contains 364 pages of horror adventures and monsters that you can use to terrorize your players from level 0 to level 12. The book is available on our website or on drivethrurpg.com and you'll find links to it down in the description below. If you don't want to buy a whole book, well then what's wrong with you? If you don't want to buy a whole book, then hop over to our Patreon where you can get access to the written version of all of our guides and adventures for just as little as $1. We're coming up on 5.5 years of content pretty soon, so there's a heck of a backlog there for you, all for as little as $1 measly. You may not be able to get a double cheeseburger from McDonald's with that dollar, but you can sure as heck get access to our entire back catalog of content, so check that out using the other link down below. That being said, back onto home bases. No matter what their home looks like, it should be a fixer-upper. When your players first arrive at the home, it should be barely functional, just a place for them to drop their stuff and rest their heads. But it should have potential. Good bones. Spaces for them to renovate and upgrade. Things for them to spend their hard-earned gold on in order to get it up and running. But this is an area where I recommend a bit of caution. Not every group wants a separate minigame to manage and upgrade a property, so read the room. You know your players, and you can probably guess who among them, if any, wants to keep track of what room does what, how much gold they need to get the arcane laboratory up and running, and whatnot. If nobody wants to be bothered with any of that, totally cool. You can make all of those features unlock at certain points in your story or at certain character levels. At level 3, for example, you get access to the library. At level 4, the armory. At level 5, it's the Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. Stuff like that. A home base can and should offer a number of benefits to your players. Primarily, it can act as a central hub for their adventures. This is the place that they go back to once they're done raiding a dungeon or pulling off a heist or slaying a dragon. This is also a place where, once their characters gain some renown, NPCs can come to them and offer quests. Maybe your players are in charge of a keep that oversees some lands, and the residents come to them with their problems. Help, a dragon is stealing our sheep, or help, a band of brigands kidnapped my daughter, or help, there's an extra dimensional being eating up all of the land and killing everybody. Additionally, a home base should have features that let the players do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do. Like, it could have an extensive library that gives them advantage on history checks made within that room, or a laboratory that lets them make healing potions every day. Nothing game-breaking, just things that make their lives better or easier or just a little cooler. In addition to making the home base cool and interesting, it should have a unique and lasting personality. The best way to do this is with an interesting caretaker NPC that comes with the base or gets hired on or moves in afterwards. Heck, maybe the home base is sentient and it is the caretaker NPC. The caretaker is someone that the player characters can bond with and get attached to, and who can do their best to help the characters. This is basically a DM insert that you can use to guide the players and their use of the home base. For an underwater base, maybe a tamed Sahuagin acts as a butler and shows the characters how they can use the included submarine to get around the region. In the case of Trollskull Manor and Dragon Heist, there's a resident poltergeist that can act as a bartender. If you're doing a castle halfway up a mountain, maybe it's a kind granny that reminds you to put on a sweater before you go outside. Now, to step this up, you can add some semi-official rules that don't exist in the core rule set because, well, the core rules of D&D 5e don't have much to say on the matter of player homes and bases. Outside of the Dungeon Master's Guide, however, there are two semi-official sources for these rules. The first is the Unearthed Arcana rules for Bastions. I mean, sure, it's playtest material, but it's interesting nonetheless. Bastion rules lay out how player home bases, or bastions as they're called, have their own turns that last 7 days, how they gain points, and how those points can be spent to have the bastions do something like provide gold or magical items. It also lays out rules for upgrading bastions, hiring workers, issuing orders, and whatnot. Lots of groovy stuff. Then there's the gold standard, strongholds and followers from MCDM, which lays out similar rules but in a much more expansive way. I mean, it lays out how to raise a whole frickin' army, so how cool is that? You can coordinate your army's uniforms with the curtains and wall color. So whether your players are fending dragons off from their mountain fortress, concocting potions in their hidden laboratory, or sending their floral print armies out to do battle against the oncoming horde, you can be sure that a home base will take your game in some interesting directions.